going to start the recording, and just want to say real quick, thank you to everybody for coming on again. We appreciate each and every one of you guys, and so I don't take it lightly. And we'll continue to be doing this twice a month, and getting good speakers like we have today, and so we're really happy to have all of you guys. If you guys have questions after Allison presents, maybe raise your hand, or just raise your hand on the Zoom thing. Either way, that way we don't interrupt one another all the time, and it makes it easier for us to chat. And then I like to try to keep the questions, to 3 minutes or less or so, if you have questions, so that we can get answers and we can get around to everybody, so everybody gets a chance to participate as well. It's important. So, I'm very happy to have all of you guys. Last meeting we had Gail Flans. We had some Zoom issues. I'm going to take the blame for it. I think it probably was me. I must have hit a wrong button or something, and it made it difficult for people to get in. So I appreciate all of you guys for coming on today, and maybe we'll get a comment or something put out that says we got that fixed. So anyway, but Gail did a good job. She was from Bethesda Hospital in Florida, and I do have the recording, and we send that out as well. So today we're going to have Allison Phillips with Neuro Speech Therapy. She's a speech language pathologist who has a background in providing cognitive communication and swallowing therapy to people who've had stroke. And she's going to talk about how stroke can impact your speech, voice, and language. I think she's going to talk about healthy brain habits as well, and some stuff like that. She's very aware because I kind of set a tone on how many minutes, but we're going to give her the mic and let her run. And we're in great shape, Allison, as far as time goes. So take your time, and let's give the best we can to these folks. So thank you so much for coming on, Allison, and I'm going to hand it off to you.
Thanks, Keith. Well, I also want to say thank you for having me. I was able to participate in one of the support groups a few weeks ago, and I'm really grateful to have that experience, because first off, I could just feel the love and connection that everybody had for each other. And for me as a therapist, that's what all of my work is founded on, is that love and connection that I share with my patients. And so it was really cool to see that as a group. And then the other thing that it showed me is maybe some areas where I could help with education. There were some questions that people had, and some people had mentioned, well, my doctor never talked about this symptom with me, or, I'm having these cognitive problems, but I don't really know where to get the information or what to do. And so that kind of helped me see where I could potentially be beneficial. So I'm going to share my screen really quick. So like Keith said, I'm going to be talking about the cognitive and communication changes that happen after a stroke. And the reason why I'm going over this information is to validate your experience. And it may help you also understand, folks in the support group, maybe you don't struggle with those symptoms, but they do. And so it will just help you kind of understand, another person's struggles and learn something new. And then the next thing I'm going to talk about is the value of speech therapy. You may have received it, right after your stroke. And, there's kind of a myth, well, I already had speech therapy, there's no way that I can get better, but we're going to talk about those myths together, and how, even 20 years after a stroke, there's still benefit of speech therapy.
Mm.
And then I'm going to answer that question of what can I be doing to improve my cognition and communication? Because this is really within your power, which is really cool because after a stroke, oftentimes folks feel really powerless and kind of on a boat on their own. And then the last thing that I want to talk about is the power of hope. I heard this theme a lot throughout the discussion that I participated, and I just want to validate that there's real research out there that supports the idea that people who experience a stroke and are hopeful, they have better outcomes than their peers who don't feel as hopeful. So first, I would just like to introduce the ways that a stroke can impact a person when their cognition and communication changes. So first off, obvious is that communication piece, and then your participation in, whoops, oh, okay, I had little fancy things, but that's okay. And then another thing that's impacted is your life participation. Right after your stroke, you probably noticed that things like taking a shower by yourself became difficult. Gardening or going to a book club, participating in church, all of those things became more challenging to participate in, and possibly you don't participate in those anymore because of the communication struggles that you have. And then the last thing that a stroke can impact is your emotional state and well-being. And all of this is measured on what I would give, and many speech therapists would, is the aphasia impact questionnaire. So at the beginning of therapy, I would hand this to a patient just to measure, their levels of communication difficulty, how much are they participating in their own life, and how are they doing emotionally. And oftentimes you'll find out that they're struggling in all of these areas. So I want to introduce you to a patient that I recently worked with. We're going to call her Patsy, and here's a little picture of her. And I gave questionnaire to her, and just like I said, I found out that she was really struggling with communication, specifically word finding. So wanting to say the words that she had in her brain was really difficult. She couldn't, she wasn't going to church because she was afraid of her communication difficulties and being judged. Physical difficulties and fatigue made it really hard for her to garden. And those physical components after the stroke made it difficult for her to shower on her own, which was really important to her. And last, it showed that she was feeling really isolated and depressed. And so I'm going to talk about, after Patsy went through therapy, how things changed for her. So first, I'm going to review, the cognitive and communication changes that happen after a stroke. And there's also swallowing difficulty that can happen, but that's not really what my presentation is about. And speech therapy can help you with this. However, we're going to dive into more detail about those communication changes. So the first thing that can happen is what's called dysarthria. And the reason why I'm kind of going over these names and what happened is because when you know the name of your diagnosis and what's been difficult for you, it makes it easier for you to advocate for yourself. In the grocery line, they may not understand you, and you could say, well, I have dysarthria, and this simply means that your speech is slurred, and that's because your articulators are weak. The next thing that can happen is apraxia of speech, and that's when in your brain you know what you want to say, something like turkey, but then for some reason the message gets jumbled up and it comes out as a non-word or a word that you didn't mean to say. And feel free to kind of speak up while I'm talking about these, and you can say, yeah, that happened to me right after my stroke, or that still happens to me. Another less known thing that can happen after you experience a stroke is actually stuttering. And what happens is your brain knows exactly how to say the word, but then for some reason, the timing of when exactly to say those speech sounds is jumbled up, and then it comes out as repeated words or repeated beginning words. One lesser known change is actually voice changes. So you may have noticed after your stroke that your voice sounded different, or it was hoarse or quiet. Let me know if I'm going too fast too.
And Allison, let me just stop you for a second here, because
Sure.
don't feel the pressure that we're trying to push you through this too fast. Okay?
Yeah.
This is
Yeah,
really
I think I
good.
just naturally go fast.
Yeah,
Sorry
this
about
is
that.
this is really good stuff, and you're hitting on the button of what a lot of us are going through. So I just want to encourage you to take your time.
Yeah,
I'll watch the clock. We're doing great, so
sure.
I want to make sure that we get question and answer time. But this is very valid stuff, and this is important, and I want you to take your time.
Totally. So maybe what I'll do is I'll go over one more as far as the communication. And the last thing that can happen after a stroke is what's called aphasia. And this is when you either have difficulty understanding what people are saying, or you have difficulty reading after a stroke. And that's that receptive aphasia. So language that we understand becomes jumbled, or you can have what's called expressive aphasia. And that's when you have difficulty saying the things that you want to say. So kind of in summary, I so far talked about changes in speech, your voice, and also language or aphasia after a stroke. I'm going to pause here and just see, a head shake or something. Did anybody experience these symptoms that I described or are still experiencing?
Yes.
Okay. Now, before I move on, and, I think it's great to see that this community has all experienced those exact things, because you can talk about it and share, hey, this really helped me. And just knowing that another person has gone through the same thing is really empowering. Does anybody have any questions specifically about speech, aphasia, or voice changes after a stroke? Yeah, Monica?
Yes. Hi. I understand. I have dysphagia, which you can probably hear in my voice. I had a cerebellar stroke about 2.5 years ago. And I've just learned, I did some research, and that in China, dysphagia is treated with acupuncture quite successfully. And that there is some work being done here in something called neuropuncture, which is a form of acupuncture and neuroscience combined. What do you know about this? I have an appointment tomorrow.
Do you?
Yes.
Where are you located at?
I'm in Florida, and
Okay.
the acupuncturist at the Moffitt Center, which is a national cancer center, referred me. He found me a person who lives about 20 minutes from me, and she's
Okay.
very well credentialed. It's similar to him, actually.
Well, I will say, I'll be completely honest, I don't know anything about that. And, my hope is that you at least, it sounds like you're going to go to this person. I hope that it does benefit you. I would say, if it doesn't, you and I can talk about, specific treatments that may help you. Or, when is the last time that did you ever receive swallowing therapy from a speech therapist?
Yes, I did swallowing therapy and also speech therapy for about almost 2 years. And I got to a point where I was not noticing really change. And so I figured, so I still, thin liquids have to thicken water. I long to be able to chug a glass of water,
Sure. So, what I would say to you is there has been a change in speech therapy where it's kind of the old school method of thickening liquids, unfortunately. And new research is coming out that shows it's actually potentially more dangerous to drink thickened liquids than it is thin liquids, because you're more likely to what's called silent aspirate, which means that the thickened liquid is going into your airway and then into your lungs, and your body's not registering that it's going down the wrong pipe. Now, I wouldn't say that that is happening to you because you haven't gotten aspiration pneumonia within the last 2 years. You've been doing completely fine on the thickened liquids. However, if I were you, and you have the means to do this, I would go see another speech therapist and maybe get another swallow x-ray. Go ahead.
So how do I find an expert speech therapist?
That is a great question. So I think, just looking locally, you can look at reviews of them. And then, you can speak with them before the assessment and say, I want to speak with a speech therapist before we have the assessment. And I want to talk to her about, is her method more in recent research, or does she often thicken liquids? And I think that's kind of the tell all is, some therapists, unfortunately, and same thing with all doctors, once they learn something, that's what they learn. So if they learn that thickened liquids were practiced 15 years ago, they kind of stick to that. So I don't think that, it would hurt for you to do a little digging on the internet and then just call ahead and say, I'm really wanting up-to-date treatment for my swallowing because I want to be able to drink thin liquid safely. So I would bet you have a 99% chance of being able to safely drink liquids because at least just from looking at you now, you look very healthy, and you haven't gotten sick. And so I do think that there is hope for you, just from me kind of informally talking with you.
That's very good to hear. Thank you.
Yes, nobody likes thickening liquids.
No.
No way. Any other questions before I move on?
I just wanted to make sure. Oh, Michelle has a question, but I was going to just real quickly for everyone, I've known Michelle for, I don't know, on and off, couple of years, maybe. I don't know, Michelle, but I believe that I have seen huge progress recent in you. And I just wanted to call that out, and I wanted to give you a chance to say something. So I was glad to see you raise your hand.
My question is actually for Monica. Where are you in Florida?
I'm in the Orlando area.
Okay.
And
Keith, I'm wondering, maybe Gail Flans could help find someone for her. I'm trying to see how close. Yeah, I don't
Monica,
know.
I would also be happy to help do some looking for you. Is there a way I could get your email by chance?
Sure, I can send it to you through Keith.
Listen. I will take care of that. I will get your emails to Allison. Let me make myself a note. And Jim, have a good one, buddy. We'll see you next trip, bud. Thank you for coming on. Emails to Allison from Monica, and then Michelle. Oh yeah, I get her emails too. So I'm going to send those both to you, Allison. And then I also can hook up Gail Flans as well with Monica.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Gail knows everybody. And she's in Florida.
Yes.
Perfect.
Yeah. Okay.
So good two connections.
Thank you, Michelle.
You're welcome.
Okay. So now I'm going to go over the cognitive changes after a stroke. And these are less so talked about. So you may learn some new things. The first thing, and I think this impacts about like 60% of or more of people with who have experienced a stroke is memory difficulty. You may, a few months after your stroke, a few weeks after your stroke, really have kind of in and out memories of what that experience was like. And it can be scary because it's very scary to know what was happening to you and not, or actually not knowing what was happening to you. Mm-hmm. And one kind of common theme is that short-term memory and immediate memory, you have a lot of difficulty with, but then those long-term memories, like from your childhood or maybe high school, actually stay there. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of a common theme. The next thing that can change after a stroke is difficulty with attention. So you may notice after your stroke that you're easily distracted. If you're listening to somebody talk for a long time, you start to become fatigued, and doing more than one thing at once can be challenging. You may have also noticed visual changes after your stroke. Depth perception can change. You may have I've had patients describe that it looks like there's lines going across their eyes or, actual left and right cutoffs. And then the last kind of piece on how, a stroke can impact your cognitive skills is what's called executive function skills. And these are all of our higher level skills. So in summary, this is your ability to organize and plan things. So maybe you were able to schedule family vacations prior to your stroke. And then after your stroke, it became really difficult to organize and plan everything that you usually would for that trip. Or, even noticing your house, you may notice that it's a little bit more cluttered than it used to be. And then the last piece is mood changes. And I think this one is actually the least talked about. What I say to my patients is after your stroke, you grieve your old self. You grieve who you were, and you are going through that grieving process, and you probably will be your whole life. And so I always encourage my patients to let themselves allow that space in their heart to grieve, because you have changed. And one of the coolest things that I ever heard a patient say is, it was really empowering. She said, I am who I am now, and this is me. And so she kind of, after that grieving, came to a place of self-accepting, which was really cool. So after, a couple years after a stroke, you do experience mood changes because you're grieving, but on top of that, your brain is changing. So I've gone over this information, and now the question is, well, who can help me? And I've got a good answer for that: speech therapy. So we can help you with all of these things. And there's been a really cool shift in treatment where there, especially with speech therapy, it used to be that we would take a big old standardized test, identify what communication and cognition difficulties you were having, and then we would treat those areas and do activities that were totally not related to the difficulties that you were having in real life. So unfortunately, people's experience with speech therapy was they didn't like it, and they weren't really sure what they were doing, because, playing a challenging game or, doing a deduction puzzle has nothing to do with the difficulty of them forgetting where they put their keys every day. So there's been this really cool framework that came out that's called Life Participation Approach to Aphasia. And aphasia is that difficulty with language that you can have after a stroke. And what this does is it helps identify a person's, prior to your stroke, what were your social activities? What are your medical needs now? What are your hobbies, and are you able to do them? So then in speech therapy, we would identify what your goals are, being able to do that hobby again. Specifically, Patsy example was she wanted to get back to gardening. And you're like, well, what does speech therapy have to do with gardening? Well, there's a lot of cognitive and communication activities in that we worked on to allow her to be able to do that again. So then in therapy, what we would do is target what your goals are to get back to life. And so here's just kind of example, you know, we could name this lady, I don't know, Pam, and her social outlet before her stroke was going to book club, but she's been avoiding it because reading has become difficult for her, and also talking about what she read is challenging, and she's not sure how the book club members will, you know, think of her, what they'll think of her after her stroke. So then in therapy, what she did with her speech therapist is she learned strategies that helped her understand what she was reading and taking notes. She practiced scripts for advocating for herself and letting her book members know that she experienced the stroke and how that changed her speech. And she also practiced what she was going to say about the book with her speech therapist. And then with that work, she was able to attend book club again confidently. So here's Miss Patsy again. After, I think it was 5 months that we worked together, I gave this questionnaire again, and all areas showed significant improvement. She showed that she was confident in almost all areas of communication, except for when speaking with strangers. She was able to garden again, showering by herself was possible, and attending church. And her emotional state and well-being went from being isolated and depressed to being, what's the word? She was content and happy. All through the work of her doing her home program that we talked about at home, and also working with speech therapy. So my point is, there are real life changes that are possible. And next thing I'm going to go over is kind of myths about stroke and cognitive and communication changes, and also speech therapy. But before I move on, I just realized that I didn't stop to see. Raise your hand if you experience any cognitive changes after your stroke. Yeah. And does anyone have specific questions about cognitive changes or difficulties after a stroke?
You know, I want to, I'm sorry, Monica, give me one more second. I get to I butt in all the time, don't I? I'm sorry. So after my stroke, you know, I was a business owner, and I was voted out of my business 2 years after 2 years, because I couldn't cognitively function. And not very many of you guys know my story, but you know, that it was a brutal time. And one thing I wanted to make sure of, as you're talking about all these things and how important they all are, we need to know that it's going to take some effort. Okay, it's going to take effort on our part to get through it and to get to the, you know, to move forward. Okay, and I think that a lot of people in the beginning stages of stroke, they think, oh hell, this happened to me, it's going to be over in a couple of weeks. And then it doesn't, and they start going through this depression time. And it's those folks that need to understand, and it's the caregiver that's with them as well, because the caregivers are going through the same stuff, right? They don't know about stroke. And so I just had a conversation with, you know, I do a lot of one-on-one stuff, and man, people need to understand the importance of that you have to work on it. And then track your level of work. You got to track from where you were and move forward, because it's that tracking, it's that knowledge that I am making progress that's going to help you continue to make your progress, you know. So I hope that helps a little bit. And go ahead, Monica, go ahead.
So I'm a psychologist and psychoanalyst. mostly retired, but occasionally I do sessions. And what I have noticed is that I'm very good at still tracking what's going on with someone, but I used to be able to move from one level to another, from abstract theory to the interaction between us to the patient's past, etc. And now I don't do that. And what happens is that I've learned that after a session, when I wake up in the morning, I'll be thinking about what happened. And at that point, I make the connections. So, so my first question is, what happens that that's the case, that you discover after the fact, or when your mind is fresh or something like that, what's going on? And just practically, I should say, what I then do is I sometimes will offer patients a free session to focus on what I missed in their session, or I will just text them some information. But it's striking to me the difficulty moving between levels of abstraction.
So probably what you're having difficulty with is that kind of last piece that I talked about, that executive function piece, which I'm sure you're very familiar with. So, you know, being able to connect all those things together while you're in a session takes a lot of skill and a lot of thought process. And so maybe you notice that there are similar things in your life that you're having difficulty with. And so that could kind of help you piece together, well, am I having difficulty with executive function? And at least the piece, you know, why, go ahead.
That is true, but what puzzles me is why in the morning when I wake up does it come very clear to me?
Sure. So from what I know, there is something about sleep that we comprehend what happened that day while we sleep. Or, you know, if you were studying that day and then you go to sleep, and you study it over a course of time, you're more likely to remember what you're studying or what you experienced because of sleep. Also, you know, I find with a lot of my patients that their brain works the best in the morning. It's the freshest. Would you say that's true to you?
Yes, absolutely.
So maybe one strategy, go ahead, Keith.
Well, I don't want to cut you off, but Monica, you know, some of this stuff rings true for me as well. And so I have my own thoughts and I want to just share those with people. I don't want to cut you off, Allison.
Oh, well, that's okay. Go ahead.
Okay.
I lose track easy too, so go for
it. Monica, I think that, and this is true for me for sure, throughout the day, certain things happen. And if I don't deal with something, or I don't, you know, I'm not as sharp as I was in the morning, then I immediately, after stroke, I start going into an anger position. I don't get mad or, you know, pissed, but I get a little angry at myself. And then I go down a rabbit hole and forget it. I cannot think straight and I cannot bring that back. And so one of the things I like to help people with, and help myself with, frankly, is to try to relax. Because when you're sharp in the morning like that, but you're relaxed, you're just coming, getting on with the day. But then certain things happen throughout the day. And if you can try to relax and calm yourself again, a lot of times it helps with your thoughts. I just wanted to mention that.
That's so true, Keith. You know, and you may find when you're in those moments that you feel a little nervous, anxious, flustered because you're like, oh, wow, I have to make all of these connections at once. And I used to be able to do that. Now it's harder for me. And so, you know, all of the first thing to shut off when we're anxious or nervous is those higher level executive function skills. So you're exactly right. I think, you know, maybe in some way you could use some strategies to help you relax, just like Keith said, which I know you know a lot about.
Bev had a question.
Go ahead.
I ended up losing years of my life in past memories. And slowly, after many, many years, my first stroke was 1999. So I'm a long-term survivor. Anyway, after many, many years, I got those memories back, but I was one that the short-term memory was fine. In fact, I completed my PhD after I got a stroke. And I had difficulty on the keyboard. I would cry because I couldn't remember how to spell the. You know, and I was writing the psychosocial dynamics of personal religious experience of the Wesleyan person. Although, you know, I mean, I could say it, I knew what I was doing, I could type a lot of that, but the, simple word like the, put me into tears, and I couldn't find even the right letter to start with. Thank God for spell check. And I did get my doctorate, so it was pretty good, but it was crazy. I just couldn't believe that it was, and now, even now, I mix up letters. You know, I know how to spell the word, but I mix it up and I can't get it spelled right, even now. And this has been since 1999. So, yeah, I mean, you practice, you continue to do, because I was a minister. And so I had to immediately get back up and preach and, you know, do whatever I could do. I arrived at Oxford, England in a wheelchair, and 2 years later walked off the plane carrying my own luggage. So I never gave up, but it is a struggle. It really is. You have to determine every day that this is my goal, this is what I'm going to do, this is going to happen. And even if you can't quite get it done, you know that there's always the next day that you can make up for what you didn't do before. But I encourage everyone not to give up and to try your best no matter what. Even if it isn't as good as it used to be, it still can be something that you're working toward to be more encouraged, because it can happen that you have those memory losses, these other issues, the language problems, that kind of stuff, but it doesn't have to define you.
Yeah, I love that you said keep working at the specific thing that you want to get better at. And the other piece that I love you said is your reaction to having that difficulty is everything. And I've gone over, you know, with my patients before, we know that you're going to experience this difficulty. We know that you're going to feel frustrated. So let's plan on your reaction. How are you going to cope with it? Because that's just as important as practicing that specific skill, if not more important. Because we experience frustration not only in those specific ways on how a stroke impacts you, but just in life in general. Any other thoughts before I jump back? There's just a little bit left.
I'm gonna save a comment for the end here.
Okay. So I kind of love that we talked about the fact that you have to keep working at the specific things that you're having difficulty with. Because oftentimes what I hear from my patients is my cognitive and communication skills are going to stay the same. And even worse, I've heard patients that fear that their cognitive and communication skills are going to get worse over time. And unless there's some type of underlying issue like dementia, this is false. Your skills will often stay the same or they'll get better, especially if, like you said, you keep working on that specific skill, they will get better. And what research has shown in terms of speech therapy is you could have had a stroke 20 years ago. And then, let's say your speech has sounded the same, just a little bit slurred. And then you go back to speech therapy, you will still show growth. And so that opportunity for growth will always be there. Another myth that I kind of already kiboshed is speech therapy is a place to work on worksheets and play games. And unfortunately, a lot of people have had that experience. And if you choose to go to speech therapy again and you see something like this, I encourage you to advocate for yourself and say, I'm having real life problems with my memory. I'd like to work on that. And then the last myth that I'd like to go over is there's nothing I can do about my cognitive and communication skills. And I know this is a theme in this group, is that, you have the power. And so what I'm going to go over next are the ways that you have control over making your brain as healthy as it can be, so that your memory, communication skills are as good as they can be. And so let's say speech therapy is an option for you right now. You can still use what I'm about to go over, and it's in your control. And I've seen patients make a huge difference in their life with following what I'm going to go over. So speech therapy is an option. What can I do now? Improve your brain health. And this is through what's called the 6 pillars of brain health. So the first piece, you can remember this with the phrase be more. And so be more starts with a phrase of all the things that you should be doing, no matter stroke or not, no matter what your age, to have a healthy brain. So the first piece is being social. Your level of comfort with being social varies depending on who you are. So I've had patients that their social life included their spouse and then regularly speaking with their friends on their phone. So, it's important that in some capacity you are being social, and after a stroke, life can become very isolating. And so it can be hard to get back out there and socialize. However, it's an important piece to keep your brain functioning at its very best. And I know research has shown that loneliness is more likely to cause death than chronic smoking. The next one is engaging your brain. And so this is doing anything that makes your brain work. Essentially anything that isn't sitting back and watching TV. So this could include cooking, cleaning, gardening. It could also include, more of those classic things that you think of, like brain games, playing Sudoku, anything that gets your brain working. The next piece is managing stress and your mental health. Folks more often than not take on a huge mental load after a stroke. And oftentimes while I'm seeing patients for speech therapy, I also recommend that they receive assistance with their mental health, because, if you're trying to work on, cognitive skills, but your mental health is not great, it's going to be really hard to get better, because like I said, those cognitive skills shut down the instance that we start feeling anxiety and depression. The next piece is ongoing exercise. And so this means that you have to be regularly exercising in order to get the most benefit. And research has shown that those who engage in moderate exercise after a brain injury like a stroke have much better outcomes than those who don't exercise after a stroke. The next piece is restorative sleep. And so this means, are you feeling rested after you sleep? Yes, maybe you're sleeping 8 hours, but do you feel truly rested? Or do you wake up and experience brain fog throughout the day? And if not, then you could work with your speech therapist on developing a plan for sleep hygiene. and also speaking with your doctor, and just learning more about how to get restorative sleep. And I find this one is what my patients struggle with the most is disturbed sleep after a stroke, which is really unfortunately normal. And then that last piece is eating right. So make sure that your brain is getting the fuel that it needs to function at its very best. So maybe you're looking at this and you're noticing a few that you are doing really well with, and then also a few that maybe you could do more of. And take note of those things. And you can, after this group, can kind of think about, well, okay, I know that I'm having trouble with sleep. Where should I start, or where can I go first? And an option would be speech therapy, research on your own. I know a lot of you find a lot of good information, and also just simply starting with your doctor. I've heard a lot of patients try some things on their own as far as like medications and whatnot, without talking to their doctor. And, you know, I would always say just talk with your doctor first, because they may not be as beneficial as you think. And then before we move on, because the last piece is just the power of hope, any other thoughts or questions about the 6 pillars of brain health? Okay. So then the last piece that I wanted to go over was the power of hope. And the reason why I wanted to go over this, like I said, is because the last time that I participated in the group, you know, everyone was encouraging each other. You got to have hope. Keep that hope up. And I just want to validate that with, there is real research out there that says those who have experienced a stroke, who have hope, have better outcomes than the folks that don't feel hopeful about their recovery. And so really at the end of the day, what it boils down to is that hope. And I think it's really cool that, you know, sometimes that flame of hope can kind of burn low, but after these groups, I'm sure a lot of you, that flame starts to burn brighter again. So it's really cool that you can achieve that through this group that you go to. So that's really all that I have as far as the presentation. We definitely don't have to keep talking about what I presented on. If there's any other, you know, emotional things that you're going through that you want to share. Otherwise, you know, I'm happy to answer questions.
Are there any questions for Allison? John.
Go ahead, John.
I want to say this, Keith, first. You know, I've been doing this now with you pretty much for 2 years now. This is the most valuable one to me personally in 2 years. Seriously.
Wow.
Everything on these charts today resonated. Every bullet, everything. And including, Keith, what you said a little early about what happened during the course of the day. Mm-hmm. Me too. This whole session was superlative, and thank you both for that.
Thank you, John. That is
thank you, John.
I mean, seriously, but I really appreciate that. I appreciate hearing from everybody about these things, because when we get speakers like Allison, which Allison reached out to me, she heard about us and she wanted to come on and speak. And so she reached out to me, and we're so thankful that she did. And anyway, thank you for saying that, because that's critically important for us to be aware of. I had one thing I was just going to mention real quick, and then I'll kind of start wrapping up if you're okay with that, Allison. And please hang with us. We'd love that if you would.
Yeah.
I want to go back to one thing that Bev said. And she said that she was going along, and then she got her memories back. I found that very interesting to hear. And Bev, do you have anything that you can shortly tell us that resonates with how that happened, or why, or what are your thoughts on that?
I think just the time that, you know, I had the stroke, and, you know, a lot of the memories were just pushed aside because I was trying to get up to speed to be still who I was. academically and, professionally. And so those memories in my past, like as a teenager and stuff, all went away. And don't mind my cat. She does that. Okay, now she's down. Anyway, so it was interesting because I'm trying to put together an autobiography of myself, and so I'm getting more and more of those memories back because I'm deliberately trying to recall that particular date and time and those kind of things. So I think being very deliberate about catching a memory that you might have lost is
deliberate and acknowledging and being open to that's what's happening. I think that's very cool. A couple of things that Allison talked about that I'm going to be looking up, and Monica, I think you mentioned neuropuncture. I'm going to look into that for all of us as well. And let's see, I highlighted a few things. The power of hope. How critical is that? And I wrote down, how do you help somebody get that hope? Because as I talk to people who are stroke survivors, and a lot of people I talk to are brand new, and they are wondering that, right? Or the spouse is wondering, how do I help so-and-so get hope again, instead of just sitting and watching TV because they don't know what to do. And I think that's a great subject. I know that I've written about that stuff as well. I'm going to dive deeper into that. I think that's a good one. And Allison, I appreciate you bringing that up, and maybe we could even work together on some of that stuff. That'd be awesome.
Yeah. I have a Brene Brown quote that I wanted to share with everyone. And I think it definitely kind of gets at that question of, well, how do you foster hope? How do you help somebody be hopeful? And what it says is emotions play a supporting role, but hope is really a thought process made of what Snyder calls a trilogy of goals, pathways, and agency. In very simple terms, hope happens when. So what it's saying is hope is not an emotion, it's a thought process. And then what she goes into is we have, so hope is we have the ability to set realistic goals. So maybe that's, I want to be able to read one word at a time. Then what we do is we're able to figure out how to achieve those goals, including the ability to stay flexible and develop alternate routes. And as you know, strokes are not a straight and narrow path. There's a twist and turn at every point, basically. And the last thing is that we believe in ourselves. And so altogether, hope is a thought process that includes setting realistic goals, being able to change, and then also believing in yourself that you can change.
Okay, so I love what you just said. And Babette, my wife, has that book as well, and so I'm gonna go find that. Something that you said though, dang, did I lose it? Monica, I have to go back to bed. Sorry about that.
Was it something that I just read?
It triggered something in me. Basically, we've got to believe in ourselves. And how do you get somebody to start believing in themselves? Like, most of us in this room here have been through a lot of life. Okay. We're not the younger group. And a lot of really, the younger generation of stroke survivors in their 20s, let's say, they know they have a lot to do and they work at it and they get back in the game, frankly. And there's some truth in that. Some of us have stroke later in life, and we were on a trajectory, and then all hell breaks loose and your whole game has to change. And it's depressing. Okay. I mean, for me, it was that way. And for 90% of the people I talked to. And so how do you get someone who is in their 50s, 60s, 70s, who had their game plan was there, they have a stroke and they cannot do what they could do, and that's when the depression really comes in. And so I'm dealing with a person like that right now, and I think that's a subject that we've got to bring up and broach and talk about and get everybody's feedback on, because all of you people here I respect very highly, and I think you all have something to say about that. And I'm writing that down for another subject, or a time for another time. Excuse me. So sorry, I was rambling a little bit, Allison, but these are things that come up in these meetings, and I want to make sure that we are addressing these things. We're talking about this stuff. So anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to overtake that, Allison. Let me just wrap up then. Okay. I appreciate everybody. Jim left, but Jim's stroke anniversary was today. Does anybody else have a stroke anniversary in July? Do they have their Michelle? When was yours?
Well, I'm on stroke number 8, and I've had 5 in July.
Wow.
Good. It's not a great month. The only good thing is that my grandson was born this month. Thank goodness for him. But other than that, July is not a great month.
Okay, well, I'm gonna challenge you on one thing, Michelle. Okay, your grandson was born. Okay, but you are still here. You are still with us.
Yes.
And yeah, and you weren't taken. And so there's power in that. Please find that power and continue on. You look great, and good on you. So, all right.
My last stroke was in March, as well as a broken leg. So in 1 week, I found out I had a broken leg, a stroke, and then a hole in my heart, a PFO, which I'm not sure if that has anything to do with the strokes.
Probably.
But just over the last couple of weeks, that hope has come back. I've survived. You know what I mean? I've done that, and I've rehabbed more than once, and so feeling that fire within again to go and participate in life is huge. But the vacuum of depression, like you said, the topic of depression and the vacuum of depression, I can feel it pulling back on me. I had a friend visit last week, and we've been friends since childhood, and just her, she doesn't give me any excuses, not that I need her to, but her coming here, and I don't drive anymore, but her can-do attitude around here helped me find my own can-do attitude. And before that, I was never going to go back to work, and now I'm considering going back to work. And it's really important who you surround yourself with too.
Oh man, Michelle, that was right on the money. And unfortunately, we're getting out of time here, but
yeah,
please come to the next one. The next meeting is an open meeting, and we are going to call on people like yourself and hear some stories and have some input from others. Allison, you're always welcome. I'm telling you, we have appreciated you so much for previous meetings and today especially. I really appreciate the fact that you were willing to come on and teach us. It means the world. I will get some emails out to you. It may be tomorrow. Gosh, I want to just thank everybody so much for being on here. And I hope you all come next time as well. It's when I don't even know the date, but it's the 2nd and 4th Tuesdays at 3 p.m. Pacific. Michelle, where do you live?
in Salem, Oregon.
Okay, perfect. All right. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. Everybody, appreciate you guys so much. And we'll talk soon. Thank you, Allison.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.